want to talk about legacy farming. I was at a fun little meeting a couple of years ago. Glenn, you were there with the former Secretary of Ag, Sonny Perdue. And one of the things that he said really struck me, and it stuck with me. He said, the most sustainable farm is a profitable farm. And I think that's really important. You know, most farmers and ranchers, probably more important than cash flow and putting money in their pocket, is that legacy that they're leaving behind, and that desire to have some other member of their family be able to continue that tradition. But that's not going to be a reality if it's not profitable at the same time. And probably not even if we can continue to increase profit so that we can make room for that next generation. So I think that's often overlooked how important that is. You know, we certainly aren't going to do that at the expense of the legacy that we're leaving behind, because that would, you know, that just wouldn't make sense in anybody's world. So I think those three pillars are a really good start. And if we can't get behind them, I think we're dead in the water.
Thank you. And, you know, one of the notes that I had, of course, being in the, you know, the day job that I have as an ag banker, you know, analyzing profit and loss and so on. And, you know, we've all have friends, you know, so forth that, you know, might say, well, gosh, it's not about the money, but I think you bring up a good point. If it's not profitable, how do we afford to continue to bring the next generation in, expand, tell our message, and so on? And unfortunately, it takes profits and money to do that. And I think that'll continue to be a challenge. And I appreciate you bringing that up.
And I don't think we have to be afraid. If I can just add one
please do.
thing to that, profit is not a, I mean, people think that's such a negative thing, that companies and businesses and people are turning a profit and making money. And it's, I mean, that's not that way. If we can take some land and create wealth, I mean, that's what our economy is based off of. That's a wonderful thing.
Totally agree. Thank you. Thank you. Judge, I think about, you know, what you've done there the last 20 years with the Grassland Coalition, and you know, we've got you and we've got Heidi in her position out there working hard to support, you know, the ag producers in, you know, their, you know, efforts to try and, you know, work on these three pillars. In your conversations that you're out there, as you're out there working with producers, I mean, do these three pillars kind of make some sense to you? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, they do. And I will tell you, when I first started my job, the big push was just to get people to maybe even go to a 4-pasture, some type of rotation. And I would say we've morphed into bigger than that, that the grasslands, and not necessarily always the grasslands, but agriculture as a whole can be a solution to some of water quality, water quantity positions. Now, you and I think everybody agree, we do have some bad actors out there, but that does not represent the whole. And the comment about making a profit, that is one of, in our mission statements, as sustainable and profitable grassland management. Because like you said, if it's not profitable, it's not sustainable. One thing we as a coalition, the Grasslands Coalition, has done is we've got excellent partnerships with some government agencies, NRCS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, some non-GMOs such as TNC. We've got a grant through them now. So we've reached out well with them. Probably some of our, well, I wouldn't say that, because I would even say, you know, the Leopold Conservation Award was a good thing, because that celebrates what we agree upon, and we can, you know, that brings people together to celebrate. Here's an example of someone that is doing it right and get nominated by his peers. So, you know, like, and Blair's won it last year at Sturgis, and this year Newhart's won it right west of Fort Pierre there. And, you know, and kind of a stacked enterprise on the Newhart side of things. So, so that's some of the things we're doing, that, you know, we can be part of the solution and get that message out beyond, you know, sometimes it's in Pierce, South Dakota, like you said, Casey. You know, sometimes we need to get the message that agriculture is part of the solution, not part of the problem.
No, very well said. Thank you. You know, I'd like to circle back and, you know, I think that the unified voice among the ag groups and ag producers is one thing, and the thing that's, you know, just keeps kind of circling back for me and maybe, you know, sticking in my craw a bit is how do we look for opportunities and you know, take what I see as challenges and others would see as challenges in the supply chain. Glenn brought that back or brought that up earlier, you know, through the whole COVID deal as, you know, the supply chain issues. And I look at, you know, everyone that's involved, you know, from, you know, when we look at the food supply chain, and I made myself some notes here so I wouldn't forget, but, you know, we're talking production, which is what most of us think about as production agriculture, onto processing, distribution, consumption, and down to disposal. And how do we work? I mean, I'm looking at James here with the stock growers, and you know, you read the Tri-State paper or any other publication, and just the challenges as it relates today, and the profitability from the cow calf operation through the feeders, the feedlots. You know, then we're seeing these large profits from the packers, and then you know what's happened at the retail level. And what I see is, and I want to get others' thoughts on that, is, you know, what are opportunities? I think it's easy, you know, to find what the pitfalls are, but how can we turn these around and create some opportunities for ourselves? Or what are the group's thoughts on, you know, what are small wins that we could have to try and, you know, work together? Because I assume that most of the businesses involved in those other levels and you know, chain links in the supply chain have, if you boiled it down, they probably have some of the same pillars that we're talking about. And I'd like to open that up. Maybe Bonnie, if you want to start off on any of your thoughts there. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, if somebody else wants to go first, that'd be good. There's some leaders here that might do. Give me a little time to think, if you don't mind.
James, I'm going to pick on you. The cattle's in the forefront right now, it seems like.
Yeah, that's fine. I think you outlined it pretty well. I mean, within, you know, from the producer's perspective that I represent, there's a big bottleneck, and we talk a lot about the packers, and rightfully so. There's a huge bottleneck at the retail level as well, and you know, that's a big question. That's a really tough question. You know, we need the packers. We need packing capacity. We need to expand the packing capacity. We also need to expand the resilience of that. And when you look at systems, when you've drove towards such an efficient system, what you do is you drive down the resiliency of that system. And so we've let these big companies, you know, morph into what we have now, which is the big four. And we saw during the pandemic where that's, you know, that can be a mistake. That can really shut things down in a hurry. And we think, you know, from the stock growers' perspective, we just need a whole lot more competition there. If you only have four big entities controlling, you know, anywhere above 80 to 85% of the packing capacity in the country, we think that's dangerous. We don't think that's competitive. We think that's, you know, we want a free market. We want free market competition, but that is predicated with some oversight from the government. And, you know, I think that's where we have to start there. Are there some little tools that we can do? Yes. Are there some people that are, you know, doing a pretty good job in our industry, you know, marketing a different way, you know, whether that's AMAs or selling on the grid or finding these little niche markets here and there? Absolutely. And we don't want to curtail that in any way, shape, or form. But when we look at, you know, the fact that we have roughly 4 million cattle in this state, and less than 1 million people, there's only so many little niche markets that can actually work. That's not going to make it work for every cow calf producer. And that's what from our perspectives, we want to make it work for all the independent producers. And we think the only way that we can do that is through competition from the marketplace, And, I think most of the people probably know the bills that we're after, especially mandatory country of origin labeling for beef. We think if that were the law of the land today, the people would be able to exercise their right to choose that voice and speak with that voice. And we think that would bode well for our producers. And, there's a lot of other legislation we can get into, but, then we're kind of breaking off of those pillars. And that's more my organization's point of view, but we think that's all predicated on competition, which there just isn't that as much of that happening right now as there should be.
Thank you. I want to circle back to a couple of those things, but I think for now, Glenn, you had brought up the COVID and the supply chain issue as it relates to the supply chain on the pork side. What would you see as opportunities to create, take what's a challenge and challenges just like what James just outlined, and how do we kind of change our mindset, and what could we say, hey, but this could be an opportunity? You have any thoughts along those lines?
I don't know so much about affecting profitability on the production side, but I think from an image perspective and getting the attention of decision makers, we need to broaden our vision. And several years ago, like 5 years ago, we did a long range strategic plan, and we identified that we needed to make some major efforts to grow the industry in the state because we were losing our infrastructure. We were losing veterinarians, we were losing feed suppliers and that type of thing. And I think we need to bring them into our messaging and say, and rather than talking about profits, maybe talk about economic activity that we generate and economic added value. I mean, I don't care if it's a cow-calf operation, taking grass, converting to beef, or a swine operation, taking the feed grains, converting to beef. It has a major ripple effect on all the agribusinesses, and we need to get them in our camp and get that message out that this is just not about a producer making money. Or, I understand the frustrations on the beef side, but we need to broaden that and say there has to be profit throughout the chain, and everybody in the chain is critical. As we found out with COVID, it was primarily the fact that our workforce wasn't able to be there, and so we lost capacity. We're very vulnerable, as James mentioned. Should we lose one of those packing plants, the beef sector did that with the fire. There we sit with a backlog of cattle or hogs that we can't get through, and we saw it substantially with the hogs and the COVID. And so I just think we maybe need to broaden more than just production agriculture as we're messaging the value of agriculture in the area or in the country.
Thank you. And if I could add to that, I mean, I think that's where my mind keeps going on this. I look at it from, our clients and in the bank there as an ag banker, and most everyone, has a team assembled. That team might be their vet, their agronomist, their seed guy, fertilizer person, marketing, so on and so forth, from their accountants to attorneys, maybe even their banker. And I think we embrace that pretty well, understanding we have to have a good team. And I, along with the point that you're making, I think there, Glenn, is how do we, I think along the supply chain, these different links that we've identified, to me, it seems like somehow we have to get everyone involved because we do all need each other. And I understand from the cattle side, I mean, some of the, the legal issues and so on there, but if we just got to sit down and with everyone in the supply chain and, have a beer or have a steak or whatever, I mean, what would be opportunities that we could maybe reach across lines, and how could we, it seems like right now we're kind of like this, and I just don't, at times, not always, what are the opportunities there?